Well, it's good to have you on. Paul Brown from Wasson Watch Co. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Um,
Yeah,
recent,
Wasson Watch Company.
yeah. So recently, you've been in a little bit of a firestorm on Twitter, you could say, and I guess we'll just kind of kick it off there and talk about what's been going on and some of the things that you've been discussing on Twitter and some of the backlash you've been getting and all of that. So I guess we'll start off with just giving a little bio, a little intro of yourself, who you are, what you do, what motivates you to do what you're doing and all that. So take the floor.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm Paul Brown with Wasson Watch Company. I founded the business by myself in 2018. And towards the end of 2021, early 2022, brought on a business partner. His name's Travis Rudolph. And a lot of things led to me starting the company. I've always had a somewhat entrepreneurial spirit. I love kind of doing my own thing and business. And I've started a few smaller things in the past, like for instance, in high school, I had a lawn business with like 20 customers, kind of things like that, to help pay the bills and things along those lines. But in 2018, I was actually working at a bank, JP Morgan Chase, and I had this idea. I really wanted to start a business, but not just kind of a side business, but something bigger. And I was thinking through a lot of different ideas, and around the same time, I got into watches a little bit. And for those of you who don't know, there's a specific kind of watch called an automatic watch. When you hear someone say automatic, what they usually mean is an automatic mechanical watch that works. It's self-wound by the movement of your wrist, the movement of your body. So it basically converts kinetic energy to mechanical energy in the actual movement. And so there's no battery. It's a really cool thing. And it's not a new technology. It's hundreds of years old, but it's one that has become a lot less well known with the advent and rise of quartz, battery operated watches. When those came on the scene, they very quickly became significantly cheaper than automatic watches, mechanical watches. Even the manual wound watches are more expensive to make than like a quartz battery operated watch. So a number of companies like Rolex, Omega, a lot of the big ones you've heard of, IWC, Tag, a lot, if not, in some cases, all of their watches are these automatic mechanical ones. And it's a cool mechanism from the perspective of not needing a battery. Like there's a utility element there. I hate it. I've had instances where I had a battery operated watch that just died while I was out somewhere doing something, and you don't know what time it is. Now these days, obviously, we have cell phones, and you always have that backup. You can pull out your phone, but it's nice to be able to actually read the time on your wrist. But there's also a really cool element of just like recognizing the craftsmanship and the complex intricacy that goes into building these automatic movements, right? And to have that on your wrist, and especially in these days where everything is sort of computer driven, electronic driven, and there's a sense of disposability about many of those things. Like you'll spend $500, $800, $1,000 or more on a cell phone, and you'll have it for 1, 2, 3, 4 years. Some of us, like I keep my phones way too long, so it's 4 or 5 years maybe. Right. But that's going to go away. You're not going to pass your cell phone down to your children, right? But an automatic watch is different. So anyway, I'll kind of get off that subject, but I decided to start the company, and I'm also a Christian, and I tend to be sort of bold with a lot of my stances and beliefs, and God just made me that way and has convicted me that that's something that I should be doing personally, but also publicly and whatever space that I occupy.
Me too, brother.
And so I knew from the beginning.
It's me in trouble.
Amen, man. It's like, hey, because I am this way, I like it. Like I like having these conversations. I like this, being out there in the fray, but it does not come without its difficulties as well.
Absolutely.
Right. So my business basically, I was in product development for like 3 years to get my watch exactly how I wanted. Right now, we just have one watch, the Wasson Automatic Field Watch. We are going to come out with a few more ones, but I spent 3 years in product development, then another year going from product development to getting it to market. And so we basically started selling pre-orders in June 2022, June 2022. We started shipping to customers in September 2022. And for the first 2 years of operations, like our sales were super slow. And you just try everything and you're like, what is going to work? And I was being bold in my stances and, speaking truth and all that stuff. And frankly, I never expected that to be what really helped my business. It was one of those things like, hey, I'm going to do this because I feel like this is the right thing. But suddenly, right at the end of September, beginning of October 2024, so just about 9 months ago now, our posts on X started to get a lot of traction. And, we had a couple just blow up. And over the course of a couple days, we went from like 800 followers to 5,000 followers. Wow. And then a few weeks later, we had some people with much larger followings post some of our content, mostly Peaceful Memes and Jesse Kelly both did. And suddenly we just blew up again. We went from 5,000 to almost 20,000 followers again over the course of a couple days. And all this time throughout the month of October, we're heating up. We're getting over 100,000 impressions a day, in some cases several 100,000 or upwards of 1 million right. or something. And our sales increase and just go up and up and up. And I start to realize, I start to see a business path forward, that not only can I speak the truth boldly, but I can do so in such a way that's actually beneficial for my business, that there's a market for this. People want businesses and other entities, but specifically businesses as well, that reflect their beliefs. Like we've come up in this era, in this generation, where all the big companies embrace homosexuality and global warming and all these just abhorrent positions that are in opposition to God, that are anti-American, that are bad for society. And so I think a lot of us have been craving being able to spend our money on things that are reflective of what we believe.
Right.
And I've been fortunate to be able to take advantage of that at this time.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, I'm kind of a hypocrite here. I'm wearing an Adidas shirt and buying buying mainstream brands. You are kind of gambling, and you're risking putting your money in a place that doesn't actually, that is in direct opposition a lot of times with what you believe in.
Yeah.
And it's almost impossible, it feels like, to avoid that. I feel like every brand, every company, especially when it comes to clothing or things like watches, they're all just, they all seem like they've, drank the communist left Kool-Aid to some degree. And it's like, where do you go to purchase things that actually, that you can feel good about, and you can feel like you're actually sponsoring something that you believe in at the same time. And so it's cool to see what you're doing. It's cool to see that watches is it's not something that you would think would break off into that sort of space. So it's pretty unique, I would say. But
it is. And I'll piggyback on something you said, that it's kind of impossible. Like, I would just say it is impossible to exclusively spend your money on products and services that reflect your beliefs. And I want to make that point because I also don't want to bind anyone's conscience and say, like, hey, if you're wearing a Tag Heuer and not a Wasson watch, you're insane.
Yeah, right.
Like that would be incredibly wrong on my part. Like, I'm very grateful that the Bible doesn't say thou shalt not do business with sinners. Because then we would all starve to death.
Yeah.
Right? Like, right, every single business transaction, whether it's a purchase or a sale or who you employ or who you work for, is some level of compromise, in that, like, all of us are sinners, and there's a spectrum of, like, totally abhorrent. So you can go to Starbucks, you can shop at Target, you can wear your Adidas t-shirt, all these things, like, and in fact, we live in an economy where it's basically impossible not to do some of these things. Um, but that doesn't mean that it's also not good for us to seek out those things that do represent us. And it's a breath of fresh air when we have the opportunity. But because there are other factors as well. There might be a quote unquote better ideological option, but it might be twice the price.
Yeah, and I was going to say,
and that's a factor.
Yeah, I was going to
too.
say, even I mean, even with a watch, I'm sure there's a bunch of different parts that go into it, and you can't control where necessarily the parts are manufactured all the time. And that's true about anything. I mean, even if you buy a T-shirt from a Christian company, where did the fabric come from? Did like you go down the list, you can't actually be 100% pure from, where it's only Christians making every part of this that makes the product possible. But that said, I think there's like a joy that comes in putting your money somewhere where at least, the person running the company or a lot of the people working at the company or the mission statement of the company, or, where they might give their money elsewhere to charity or whatever, it at least aligns with your values a lot more than, something like Adidas. And so I think it's awesome to see Christians kind of taking a stand and making useful products. Cause I think a lot of times we think of ministry as this kind of boxed in vocational, you're working in a church type of thing. And I think ministry is much larger than that. And I think it has to do with Christians actually going out into the world and making things that are useful and beneficial to people. That is ministry in and of itself,
Amen. Yeah. It's opportunity to glorify God, right? Do everything as unto the Lord, and it's an opportunity to love our neighbors as ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. God is. We can go off on so many tangents in this conversation, but I'll just say really quickly, God is the creator, and one of the things He did that's really cool is when He made humans, He made sub-creators. Like, it is to the glory of God when humans create. Every single, the house that I'm in, the watch that I wear, the car that I drive, the phone that I have, these are all these really fascinating inventions that were made by many people over periods of time and perfected and continue to be perfected. That's a miracle. And God made that possible. That's super awesome. So anyway, I love thinking about that, and I love putting that in people's minds, that you can, in the same way that you can look at a beautiful sunset and say, wow, God, you're amazing. Thank you for making that. You can look at a city skyline and do the same thing. You can look at a beautiful car driving by on the freeway and you can go, God, you made people who make that. That's awesome.
Right. I think we have this idea sometimes of there's man-made things and then there's things that are made by God, and there's this hard line in between both. I don't think that's how it is. I think we are created by God to create things and to give glory to God via creating things and making things that are useful or cool or interesting or beautiful or whatever it might be. And the cool thing about a watch is it's both useful and it's a beautiful, awe-inspiring invention in a way. It kind of checks both of those boxes. But so getting into some of this Twitter controversy that's going on right now. So I wrote this article. Let me actually pull this up on the screen if I can. I don't know if I can do this let's try this. First time I've done this in an interview like this, but there we go. There it is. I wrote this article, and you shared this tweet in particular right here. I think this was one of the first ones, at least that I saw, that was pushing back against some of this weird stuff going on the right, where you said, "Dear Nazis, groypers, and anti-Semites, there is no room for you in MAGA, conservatism, or the Republican Party. You have shown where your loyalties lie. You choose Iran over America. Your hate for Israel is literally all that guides you. We don't need or want you. If you are ready to come out of your delusions and come to the right side, which is also the winning side, great. We'll be happy to have you. The rest of you can pound sand. You are total losers." That sounds very much like Trump right there. All the losers. Yeah. You are total losers who have no power or influence here, which I think, by the way, that's all true, especially that last part. I think we're learning where you said you have no power or influence here. They really don't. I mean, as far as government goes and politics and And the Trump administration, as we're seeing how they're dealing with Iran specifically right now, they don't have any influence. I mean, he did the exact opposite of what they all said
Right.
they wanted him to do, and yet they're all now still trying to take credit as if they somehow pressured the Trump. You'll see, Jason Whitlock and Candace Owens and others saying this, that they pressured the Trump administration into acting how they did, which was exactly the opposite of what they said they wanted him to do in the first place, which makes no sense.
Yes.
But yeah, so what's the motivation behind this? How did you come to this realization? What were you seeing that led you to post something like this?
Yeah. So, I've always had an aversion to anti-Semitism. It's the way I was raised. There's both theological reasons for that, and then several layers of theological reasons. The one that I think everyone can agree with is that all humans are made in the image of God, right? And therefore, like anything, we can recognize certain traits about different people groups or nationalities and so on. Whatever, there can be some averages, but to dehumanize any people group is sinful and contrary to the truth. Like, we're all very special and valuable because we're made in God's image. But after I started to blow up, my account, like I mentioned, in October of last year, along with just a lot more people following me, a lot more attention, a lot more comments, I started to notice this trend of people just making anti-Semitic remarks, and often like very veiled ones. You say something about like, "Hey, the degradation of our society is horrible," and you're like, "Who's behind the degradation of our society?"
Just asking questions,
and they've just asking questions, just noticing all this stuff, and guys have got like, their profile pictures with a Nazi uniform or SS stuff, or various takes on swastikas or whatever it may be, and I had spoken openly about support for Israel, opposition to anti-Semitism in the past, both in my personal account and in my business account, but it was well before I had any kind of following. Like, it went mostly unnoticed. And so as my account grew, and I saw this, I inherently knew if I make a stink about this, if I put up a fight, it's going to be a pain. Like, they're going to make a big stink. It's going to be a whole big thing. I don't want that.
And that's what happened.
And and that is what ended up happening. And I'll say this, like, for my own sort of personal convictions, none of us is obligated to make public statements on any given topic. All right. There's all kinds of things I say nothing about, and all kinds of things I say things about. However, to me, James 4:17 says, for him, who knows the right thing but fails to do it, for him it is sin. And I started to have this growing conviction that, like, I need to counter this. I need to say something about it. But I also knew, like, this is going to be such a pain. And what happened is, my very recent comments over this week or the last several days are what have really blown up. But I actually made a post about a month ago saying something along the lines of like, "Hey, like, just so you guys know, I don't hate Jews, and the Holocaust did happen, and Nazis and Hitler are evil." Like,
and they just, freak out.
And I wrote this whole post. They freaked out a little bit, but it didn't have nearly the impact that these more recent posts have had. I lost maybe 1,000 followers at that time, and then it just kind of died down. And some people certainly remembered. I continue to get these follow-on folks of like, this guy, is a Jew lover or whatever the things they're going to say. But then leading up to this Iran deal, I have a background in, I was in the Marine Corps. I worked in intelligence, both in the NSA while I was in the Marine Corps and the Defense Intelligence Agency as a civilian. My dad served in the Marine Corps as an infantry officer. My brother was a Marine Corps artillery officer. I've got uncles, cousins, grandparents who served in the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force. Me and several of my family members have deployed to the Middle East. I deployed to Iraq. My brother deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. I've been following Middle East affairs for a long time, even before I joined the military. And like everyone, then in my generation, the 9/11 thing kind of had a big impact on me and a lot of other things. But I know without a shadow of a doubt that Iran is an enemy of the United States, that they have been actively killing Americans basically as often as they have the opportunity since
There was
1979.
there was I think it was Marjorie Taylor Greene who tweeted some big kind of unhinged post about this whole Iran thing somewhat recently, maybe a few days ago. And she made a statement in there that said she doesn't know of any casualties that any American casualties that Iran is responsible for. This is the kind of stuff that you're hearing from these people, and I don't think it's based in truth. I think it's just based in this rabid hatred of Israel, and they're going to side with anyone who poses a threat to Israel, it seems, and or at least downplay the severity of the threat that they are. But,
and as an elected U.S. House representative, that's a negligent level of ignorance. And you have certain people in positions of power and leadership that are operating at best with negligent ignorance, but at worst, they're acting in bad faith. Like they know the truth or have an inkling of the truth, but they deny the truth intentionally in order to deceive and to craft a false narrative, right? And then you have all these other people at different levels, and there's varying levels of ignorance, right? And we're entering an age of greater ignorance that's sadly fueled by people's access to information. Why do I have to know things if I have access to the thing that can tell me everything? Right? I've got my cell phone, and I've got my computer, and I can just go on, I can Google it. And so people fail to become subject matter experts. Many people, obviously some people don't. And so I know that Iran's an enemy. I also know, due to Shia eschatology, that Iran they're not a stable actor. They don't, like, we can logically assume that Kim Jong-un does not want to die, and that gives him massive incentive to never launch a nuclear missile at the United States, because we'll turn North Korea into a lava field, right? And he will die. There's no getting around that. Shia Muslims believe, they have this eschatology, this end times belief, that someone called the 12th Imam or the 12th Mahdi is going to come and basically establish,
it's like their Antichrist, Islam, more or less.
And well, to them, he's like their good guy. It's to them, he's like the Antichrist to us, frankly, the way he's described. Right. But he's their Messiah figure. And but what's going to usher in his appearance is something like our tribulation. Whether you believe in the tribulation or not, it's just a good analogy to use. This time of trouble and chaos and destruction and war. And so there is this segment of the Iranian population and within Iranian leadership that's not only okay with sort of worldwide war and chaos and destruction and death, they're advocating for it, even if it results in the destruction and death of many or all Iranians. They may die as martyrs in this, as a sacrifice to bring about the 12th Mahdi. Right? And so when you see them as irrational actors who are actively enemies of the United States, who have participated continuously for 4.5 decades in trying to kill as many Americans as possible, often being very successful, such as the 1983 bombing of the Marine Corps barracks in Beirut and the United States Embassy in Beirut, through Iranian-backed Hezbollah terrorists. Like, that's one data point. Deadliest day for the United States Marine Corps since World War II. And one of my dad's best friends died in that attack. Right? So I don't just have this sort of like geopolitical understanding of it. I have a personal understanding of it. I recognize the toll and the destruction that Iran has brought upon the world and upon Americans, and I don't trust them with nuclear weapons. And in fact, I expect them to be bad actors with them to a degree that is beyond that of other nations. I don't want China to have nukes. I don't want North Korea to have nukes. I don't want Pakistan to have nukes. But you know what? I don't expect any of them to use them because of the basic human incentives that are inherent.
Yeah, they're not operating from the same type of suicidal ideology where their suicidal aims, you could say, and that sort of thing would actually, like what you're saying, would give them a higher seat in what they see as heaven and the afterlife, where they get all these rewards and it's like they're martyrs and they're honored for doing so. They have incentive with that deeply rooted ideology to use a nuclear weapon to foment further chaos. It's like like what you're saying, their end goal is the chaos.
Yeah. So I know that's kind of feels like an aside, but it's really just a really important piece of information, because then I come on the scene and I'm on X and I see all these people talking about, I'm not dying for Israel, and like another forever war by Israel. Like, Israel hasn't gotten America into any forever wars. Like Iraq and Afghanistan were not about Israel. But, that aside, they're making all this stuff at it being about Israel when it's not about Israel. And I can tell, because I've seen this trend of the anti-Semitism, this Groyper neo-Nazi sort of perspective that many people are embracing online. I see the very clear parallel between the anti-Semitism and the opposition to a conflict with Iran. Now, I'm not saying that everyone who opposes U.S. involvement in the conflict with Iran is an anti-Semite. There are legitimate reasons for not wanting to do that. Like, being a pacifist, while I totally disagree with the perspective, is a legitimate perspective you can have, right? Being scared that the United States could get dragged into another forever war, like, I think it's fearful, overly fearful. I think it's wrong, but it's a legitimate concern to have. It doesn't have to be driven by hatred for Israel. But seeing so much hatred for Israel coming out at really high levels too, big accounts like Hodge twins and other folks saying stuff about Israel that I found very objectionable. I felt like I needed to double down on what I said a month ago and really come out swinging. And so that particular post that you showed, to be really clear, and you can see it in the way it's written, I was addressing those who are Nazis, Groypers, and anti-Semites very specifically. And I was saying to those people, you're not welcome in the Republican Party and MAGA and conservatism, and that is what drives your opposition to our conflict with Iran. I try to be as clear about the way I said it as possible. But many people cast what I said in a light of, oh, you're saying that everyone who opposes conflict with Iran is a Nazi anti-Semite. And ipso facto, by saying that they are Nazis, you're basically saying that it's okay to attack them. So you're making a death threat to everyone who doesn't agree with this. And it's because you're controlled by Israel.
Yeah.
And it's because you're this Jew lover. And a little aside, I mean, maybe this is getting more into the results or whatever. But like, I've gotten so many insults and slurs.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
Over the last several days. Yeah. A lot.
I can sort of relate to that because, when I started first posting about this stuff, I made a Twitter account back in, I think it was August or something like that last year. And, I was doing some writing and at that time I was writing op-eds at the Federalist. I wrote a few for them. And then I, from there, went to Not the Bee, and now I'm doing op-eds with Christian Post as well. And ever since I started writing these op-eds for Christian Post specifically, and I think every single one of them has to do with, this whole phenomena of the woke right and this weird anti-Semitic push from certain figures on the right. Almost all of them have to do with that to some degree or another. And ever since I started posting those, I've just been getting comment after comment after comment of these largely, some of them not, I would say 90% of them, anonymous accounts harassing me, death threats, getting weird DMs from people. It's been obsessive ever since then. And I've just kind of gotten used to it ever since then. But knowing that happens once you start speaking up against this stuff, I think it really reveals the dark spiritual nature behind this. It's not Christian, and a lot of these people are claiming to be Christian. They're claiming to be, conservatives and real patriots and real Americans and all this stuff. But that's all a mask, I think, and you really see the darkness come out when you actually start taking a logical and especially biblical stand against all of this. So, I'm sure you've experienced that, of course. So,
oh yeah, yeah. It's not just been the intensity; it's like the volume as well. I looked at my analytics on X a little bit ago before we started this, but in the last 2.5 days, I've gotten somewhere around 7 million impressions on my content on X, around 15,000
Wow.
replies. Um, about a large percentage of them, well over half, but I don't know the exact percentage, just very negative, like very hateful kind of content. I've had around, I've kind of lost track, but like 15 watches pre-orders canceled, which is a pretty like sizable extent. At the same time, I've also had a bump in my sales a little bit, and I've had a lot of people reach out directly to express their appreciation and to encourage and to say like, I'm praying for you and you're doing the right thing. And what I really want to do, like what is the motivation? Why does a watch company do this kind of thing, and not just like on this issue but other
Yeah.
issues? Because if you follow my content, I speak about abortion, I speak about homosexuality and like pride in America. It's very evil. I talk about the Democrat Party. I talk about fatherlessness. I talk about immigration. I talk about all these things. Being the way God made me and has prepared me to be sort of a bold speaker of truth. I see an opportunity, especially as we have this free speech platform X, that though it's got its downsides because bad actors can leverage it to tell lies and to say terrible things. Like, we have this platform and we have the opportunity to build and shape narratives and to impact the way people view
Yeah.
the world. And my goal is to be on the very cutting edge, extreme edge of truth, dragging the Overton window in that direction. Like, I want to be a berserker, of, if you know the term, a berserker was this warrior, of the Vikings. It would just go absolutely wild and charge towards the enemy and often die, right? Like, the berserker would probably die in his attack, but he would usually be a very big, strong, wild, kind of crazy man and throw himself at the enemy and create a hole in the enemy's line that, the other guys could follow in behind him. And that's what I want to do. I want to make it safer for people who share my beliefs to speak up
Yeah.
about them, because I'm out here kind of at the front pushing the limit and taking flack. But God willing, if God continues to give me the grace and the strength to stand, but taking that flack well and not caving under the pressure. And I'll be honest, I've felt like down today. Like, I've felt the stress
Yeah.
of this, but I know that God is good and he is in control and he has a plan. And I'm trying to seek his wisdom and counsel in his word and in trusted friends. Like, I want to be careful about the steps I take and how I take them.
Right.
And I'm prone to error as well in all of this, but I feel more clear in my conviction than ever that this is a topic I need to be speaking out on, because it's a much bigger problem than I realized just a few months
Yeah.
ago.
When did you really start to notice how big of a problem this was, and specifically in Christian circles? Because I know, there's the whole, Christian nationalist Joel Webbin sect of this bizarre phenomena, you could say. These are people that I once admired and looked up to and watched their content on YouTube, and during the COVID era and all of that. And it seems like there's been, at least what I've noticed, and this is why I started speaking up about this, there's been this weird trajectory shift towards away from critiquing the left, to and I say positively, not meaning that it's a good thing, but it's their version of a positive vision, positively proposing this weird, almost neo-Nazi philosophy, this ethnic-based nationalism that seems to be directly targeted at Jews more so than anyone else, at least that I've noticed. When did you start to notice that exactly? When did you become a noticer?
When did I notice the noticers? Man, I don't know if I could put my finger on it exactly. Rather than it being like a big overnight revelation, I would say it was a more kind of like slow uptick over time as I continued to just see people commenting on my stuff. And a lot of them, like, to take a step back here and add some more context on X, for instance, the vast majority of them are anonymous. So
Absolutely.
who these people are, I don't know. Some of them I think are legitimately white American neo-Nazis. Some of them I think are teenagers and other people who lack much conviction on the subject but are trolls and recognizes this is a taboo
They'll use
subject
the
and
word
they think it's
based, and
fun.
I think that just kind of means, I've heard
Yeah,
James Lindsay talk about this, for example, where he explains it as not meaning based in reality, which is what it's supposed to and maybe originally meant.
yeah,
It's like their version of transgressive. So they just want to do things that are
yeah.
transgressive and punch where they're not supposed to
It's
punch and
taboo.
say the things they're not supposed to say because it makes them feel powerful. I think that's a lot of the motivation.
Yeah,
I know people personally that have fallen into that. I mean, even in the past when I was
yeah,
younger, I mean, I'm still pretty young, but it's easy to get sucked into that stuff, especially politically
yeah.
speaking, and I'm guilty of that as well.
Yes. Oh yeah.
But
I want to, especially when you're a teenager, you're in your teens, you're in your early 20s, you just don't understand the
yeah,
consequences. There's a lot of things that like you don't like. I'm almost 40, but like I was a teenager once. I was a 20 something once. Like I recognize I did not fully understand consequences. That's a normal stage of development. But so you have those categories. You have AI bots. I don't know what percentage of them are that.
right.
You have foreign
Foreign influence. Yep.
influencers, like Texas Patriot was an account that got outed as a
Red
Pakistani.
Pill
He
Media, I think
presumably
it was,
closed
or
his account.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, a ton of different groups like this, and that it's like how many, like if you're a Muslim, you want to drive a wedge between Israel and the
Totally.
United States. You hate the Jews typically, and you recognize that Israel is one of the greatest threats to the spread of Islam in the Middle East. They're the like widely recognized enemy in the Middle East of Muslims. They've tried many times to destroy Israel, and so yeah, you're going to want to create a sense amongst Americans that there's a lot of
Oh yeah,
Americans
or
who hate
China.
Israel,
I mean,
and
these
that if you,
BRICS nations, they want
or
to do the
China,
same. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So there's a lot there. I don't know what the percentages of these people online that I encounter are representative of these different groups, but I know there are people who identify as Christian, who attend church regularly, who are in these circles, and like it has to be said, there is an inherent problem within Reformed theology, also known as covenantal theology, which is supersessionism, also known as replacement theology. And there are varying degrees of beliefs in that particular theology. I think, like, and there are varying levels of
Yeah.
dispensationalism, all the way from like, hey, like, we don't need to worship Israel or worship the Jews. I don't think that's a real thing. I think that's a straw man, frankly. But like at the extreme end, you might have Christians who believe that all Jews are saved and going to heaven by nature of the fact that they're Jews,
Yeah.
and that's not a biblical orthodox take. I personally don't know any Christians who believe that, but presumably they're out there and or have been out there at some point. And I think a lot of covenantal theology folks think that many or most dispensationalists are in that
I
camp. And
I
again,
would agree because
that's
a
just
lot
not
of
my experience.
I grew up in more Baptist circles, and there's a lot of
Hmm.
kind of old school dispensationalist types, and some of the things that I'll see thrown around about
Yeah,
this, and I'm not personally a dispensationalist, but some of the things that
right.
I'll see thrown around about dispensationalists online, specifically from these camps that we're talking about here, these hyper reformed, I don't know if you'll say replacement theologian types that are really in the like this anti-Semitic camp that we're speaking of specifically. The things they'll say
Hmm.
about people who are dispensational or dispensational theology in general is just I've never met and I know tons of people that are dispensational just from growing up around them. Like I don't know
Yeah,
anybody that actually believes the stuff they're saying or is the way that
yeah,
they like or idolizes Israel in the way that they're claiming they do. I just maybe it's just I haven't met
yeah,
those people. I'm sure maybe some of those people are out there, but I've
yeah.
never heard of it. So it seems like a big straw man.
So on the covenantal side, I've come to so I grew up very
Yeah,
dispensationalist, and I go to a covenantal church. I'm at a PCA church. Um, I don't find, for me personally, the labels dispensationalist or covenantal to be super helpful way to define myself. I believe the Bible is
I would
absolutely
agree with you.
true.
Yeah,
Um, you know, and I think that there are errors in every form of systematic theology. And one of the problems with any kind of systematic theology is you're taking a human construct, a human logical construct, and you're placing it over the
Yes,
Bible.
totally.
And like everyone in any system of theology is at risk of making the exact same mistake that the Pharisees made. And you take all of these writings, you take church historical writings and contemporary ones, and like we can chat for hours about these different theological beliefs with all our man-made premises, and we can focus on the man-made descriptions and explanations, interpretations of Scripture over the Scripture
Yeah, and then
itself.
try to shoehorn
And
our
the fact
biblical
is, there's
theology into the system. Yeah.
yes, and the fact is, there is a lot of room for mystery in the Bible. Tons. Proverbs says that it's a glory of kings to find out a thing, but it's a glory of God to conceal things. Like God has concealed things. We don't know the hour or the day of Christ's return, but on the dispensationalist side, you have all these people, and it's not just dispensationalists, who are literally obsessed with trying to figure out like the signs of the times and what's happening, what's going to happen. You're not going to figure it out.
Right.
Okay. Like, I don't care if you're all-mill, post-mill, pre-mill, pre-trib, pre-rapture, no trib, whatever. Like, you're not going to figure out when Jesus Christ returns. You'll know when everyone else does. The signs aren't going to help you. Jesus said there'll be wars and rumors of wars. Like, that's all happening
That's
all the time.
constant.
It is what it is. It's constant. So I've been encouraged as I've been in the covenantal spaces more in the last several years of my life here recently, to find that there is a spectrum of belief about the people of Israel. And like what I would accept is like, hey, if you look at Romans 11 and you can acknowledge that God has some kind of special plan for the people of Israel, right? That the people of Israel exist still today, and there's something in God's plan for them that's different, that is distinct to them, like, and that's the level of agreement. I can work with that. But if you think that the nation of Israel, there's absolutely nothing at all distinct or special about their relationship with God right now, I think you're in error. I think you're in biblical error. And then a grosser error is the one of like, well, the modern people of Israel are not the people of Israel described in the Bible, the ethnic Jews.
I think that's true when you're talking about the government. So like I recently wrote an
the government.
I recently wrote an article for Christian Post about this, and I made that distinction of like, there's the people of Israel, there's the ethnic group, those descendants of Abraham, and then there's the current, the Israeli state, we'll say. Those are not the same thing. So then the complicated thing is you'll see some people that are maybe more on that hyper dispensationalist side to some degree. They'll take that passage in Genesis that says, I'll bless those who bless those and curse those who curse you, et cetera, et cetera. And they'll take that passage and they'll
apply it.
And they'll apply it to this is why we need to support the government, but it's not talking about the government. It's talking about there's that error. But then on the other side, I think what you're saying is true, where there's the replacement theology, the really anti-Semitic is kind of my assumption, at least a lot of these people, these replacement theologians, where it's like they want to use their theology to justify erasing the importance of the Jewish people entirely.
And oftentimes the same people, or within the same groups of people, where they'll say the modern people of Israel are not the same people described in the Bible as the Jewish nation. They'll also say, hey, the Jews killed Jesus. And it's like, well, wait a second. Are they them or not? Like, and of course the Bible,
that's a good point.
Makes it really clear that the Jews and the Gentiles killed Jesus. It's so interesting how involved everyone is. It was Herod, it was Pilate, it was the Sanhedrin, it was the people, it was your sin and mine, right? Like it was all of us. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, you know.
So they'll
Um,
misapply that.
but
They'll
anyway,
misapply that passage in Revelation, for example, that says the synagogue of Satan. You hear them quote that all the time, and they'll apply
yes,
that
all
to
the time.
modern Israel, the negative connotations, but then none of the positive promises of
Yes,
God. It's a
yes,
complete contradiction.
yes. Yeah. Well, and then there's the metaphorical take on Israel mentioned in the New Testament, saying when it talks about Israel in the New Testament, it's talking about the church. But you have some passages and books and chapters that refer to the church and Israel. Like, right? Like they're two separate
Yeah,
entities. Why is the writer just seamlessly moving back and forth between the two and not defining them? Like that, I'm sorry, but that's just a really poor application interpretation
yeah.
of the text. It's not
There's clearly
consistent. But
passages that are talking about Israel. It not,
yeah,
you know.
well,
Yeah,
but going back to the government of Israel really quick, like some more food for thought there. Like Ahab, King Ahab was the government of Israel, right? He was
yeah,
evil. He was an evil king. You didn't have to support King Ahab to be quote unquote a supporter of the people of Israel. But let me take a step back from that too, because I think there's positive applications. People will talk about, you know, Genesis 12:3, bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you. But there's also sort of a negative interpretation, like and man, I need to look up the passage because I'm blanking now if it was the Edomites or the Moabites. But God God condemned their celebration and taking advantage of the fact that the people of Israel were under attack and that they attacked them too. Like God condemned that. Like it's not only that they didn't bless Israel, but they cursed Israel. And Israel, even though God judged Israel severely for their
yeah,
idolatry, for their human sacrifice, for going to Egypt instead of trusting God, for so many things, um, the nations that God used to judge Israel, He judged for judging Israel. Babylon, Assyria, you know, Egypt, everyone got judged. And so like for me, I not only want to bless Israel and believe and like, hey, the you know, people are going to call me super dispy for this, but yeah, I believe that those who bless Israel, there's a blessing from God that they get from that. And conversely, I believe that those who curse Israel also get a curse from
yeah.
that.
And
And so
again,
like
that's biblically
the
consistent. You
government of
see
Israel,
that throughout.
yes,
Yeah,
yes, yeah. So the government of Israel you can agree with or disagree with, but nevertheless, I support the government of Israel protecting the people of Israel from attack, whether it be from Hamas terrorists or Hezbollah terrorists or Iran or whoever else. Like they should do that. I'm glad that they do that. I pray for the peace of Zion, right? As it says in Psalms. And these are all good things that Christians should do.
right. Yeah, I'm with you there. I think that again, a lot of these people that are proposing, you know, there was that famous clip going around of Tucker Carlson interviewing Ted Cruz, where Ted Cruz said, well, you know, I support Israel because of this verse, and I think Ted Cruz was misapplying that, and he was talking about the government and why we should support certain political policy and support Netanyahu or whatever it is. But the premise there is there's a truth behind that I think was completely lost on Tucker Carlson, and he of course didn't have an explanation for his perspective either biblically. I don't think he really knows or understands that. But yeah, I do think there's this consistency of those who are place value on the Jewish people as set apart from God, as set apart for God by God, as there being this blessing, there being this blessing from God. Again, you see that all throughout the
Yeah.
Old Testament of you know, God using Gentile nations to judge Israel, and then God judging those nations for enslaving Israel in judgment like that. And you see this back and forth. And I don't see how you can wiggle out of that if you're actually looking up the scriptures honestly.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and you know the intent of this episode, I'm sure, wasn't necessarily to become a Bible
no,
study,
this is
but
fantastic. Yeah,
the one last sort of Bible passage I would commend to everyone to really help understand the Israel deal, to those who might think that the covenant that God made with Israel is kaput or is no longer in effect in any way, I would just encourage you to read Jeremiah chapter 31, 31 through 40. And specifically, there's a few verses 35 through 7 I'm going to read
Yeah.
here that say, "Thus says the Lord, who gives the sun for light by day, and the fixed order of the moon, and the stars for light by night, who stirs up the sea so that its waves roar. The Lord of hosts is his name. If this fixed order departs from before me, declares the Lord, then shall the offspring of Israel cease from being a nation before me forever. Thus says the Lord, if the heavens above cannot be measured and the foundations of the earth below can be explored, then I will cast off all the offspring of Israel for all that they have done, declares the Lord." And what he's making here is a statement that is hey, this is never going to happen. As long as the fixed order of the earth and the universe exists, Israel will be a nation and they will be my people. What does that mean in the context of the church? And right, and God, there's two men that God is making one man, and all of these things, and grafting in and grafting out. The mysteries of God, as Paul says. There is a level of hey, I want to be humble before God and recognize I don't fully understand the interpretation of all these things, but I can look at his word and believe his promises that he says that Israel will always be a nation before him and will always be his people as long as this fixed order of things remains.
Yeah. It's such a, I think what you're saying is it's so, again, you can't really get around that biblically, at least from my analysis.
Yeah.
It's consistent. There's this weight and measure of, yes, we should be responsible to critique and hold leaders accountable, whether it's our own leaders or the leaders of Israel or any other nation. We should be people of truth, and that should apply equally to anybody, any man-made institution or leadership. But again, there's this truth that also exists where the nation of Israel is set apart in a distinct way biblically, and then as Christians being grafted into that promise, as Romans 9 through 11 talks about, there should be this love for the Jewish people that is that we see again right in the beginning of Romans 9. Paul says, "I would give up my own salvation if it were for the Jewish people, coming into the fold." And obviously that's a complete paraphrase, but that's essentially what he's saying. And if that should be our attitude, I think, towards the Jewish people. It shouldn't be one of hatred and they're ruining our lives and they're this big bad cultural hegemony that we need to destroy. It should be of love and of truth and bringing the gospel to them. Because ultimately God said that I believe personally that there will be a resurgence, a turning to Christ eventually with the Jewish people, where they, convert in mass. And I think that we're cutting ourselves off from being part of that promise if we're not actively pursuing them in love and with gospel truth. Do you know what I mean? But
yes. So, kind of landing the plane a little bit, my goal when I started having these conversations was not to make Wasson Watch Company a Zionist watch company all day, every day. This is it. This is our topic. This is everything. But my conviction has grown that this is important, and it's going to be something that I'm going to continue to talk about. And I want to say I'm really grateful for everyone who has stood by my side. There have been those who haven't, but there have been a number of those who have. Lone Star Armory is a company that has, we've collaborated on some stuff before, and they found out what was going on, and they knew that I was being attacked by a ton of people, and they jumped in. They took on the attacks, right, for themselves too. There's you guys, there's Not the Bee. You guys wrote a whole article about it and published it, and you guys already get flack for things and stuff. I don't think it's a new fight for you, but
it's just business as usual.
I've gotten tons of messages. It's just business as usual. I've gotten tons of messages from people just encouraging me, and I want to say to everyone out there who's been encouraging or stood with me anywhere, is just praying for me. I appreciate it. But let's remember that God is on our side, and if God is for us, who can be against us? And it's okay to get like discouraged or down. Paul describes despairing even unto death, right, in one of his letters. And so what we do in those situations is we strengthen ourselves in the Lord, like David did in First Samuel, when like the Amalekites had burned down his home, the city that he was living in, and him and his men had left. They came back. The women and children were taken. Their things were taken, and his men wanted to stone him. And it was like, that's the worst place to possibly
Yeah.
be. Your whole world's upside down, and your own men are talking about stoning you. And that it says that he strengthened himself in the Lord. And that's what we've got to do every single day. Like, we're not, I think anti-Semitism, neo-Nazism, whatever you want to call it, is satanic. And our flesh and blood is no match for Satan. However, the blood of Jesus Christ absolutely is. And so we can stand strongly shoulder to shoulder and expect that God has a perfect plan and that he loves us and he's good. So we're going to be all right.
I totally agree. And, I think something as well, I think that kind of courage is contagious. I think that, people that are willing to kind of put their own company on the line, like what you're doing in a sense, people that are willing to put their reputation on the line, who are willing to, one of the tweets you shared a picture and it said, burn the ships. And I think that like that kind of bravery to, I'm not going to tolerate fill in the blank evil. I don't care what it costs me. And it will cost you, certainly in an earthly perspective, whether it's friends or money or whatever it is, it's totally worth it. I think there's no greater thing there's no greater thing to aspire to than that kind of courage, that self-sacrificial courage for the sake of what's true. And I think that is the antidote that so many, especially young men that are getting sucked into this anti-Semitic stuff. I know some personally, unfortunately, that I've tried to work with and talk to, and it's just like talking to a spiritually dead person in a sense. You really get that sense of some of these people. Yeah. But I think the antidote there, of course, is the gospel, and within that is this call to something greater, this pursuit of something greater, where you're willing to sacrifice yourself. It's not this pursuit of. I was going to say this before. I think a lot of the anti-Semitic stuff is rooted in fear as well. It's rooted in, we're scared of the big bad globalists, and we're going to assign that to being the Jews' responsibility, and we're scared of living in a society that doesn't like us that much, that strips us of our power in whatever sense that is, financially, politically, culturally, it doesn't matter, religiously. And we're going to do whatever we can to try to preserve some type of cultural or social norm that gives us power back in society where it's been stripped, and maintains it above other people or enemies.
Yeah.
And that's not a biblical perspective. Like what do we have to fear even if we lose everything? What do we have to fear? Nothing.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of courage.
Don't fear the one who can destroy the body. Fear the one who can destroy the body.
Yeah. And that's the kind of courage that's so much more infectious, and it's so much more meaningful, and it brings so much more joy than just constantly pursuing political war because you're scared, which is, I think, what this anti-Semitic stuff is.
Amen. Amen. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I appreciate it. Well, I have another call I got to jump on, but I really appreciate you having me on here, Mike. I appreciate the article you wrote the other day. And,
definitely.
I love what you guys are doing, and I'll look forward to continue to standing shoulder to shoulder with you all.
Yeah, this has been good. Thank you so much for hopping on. I'll post all your stuff in the description and where people can find you and check out your business and all that. So
I love it.
Appreciate you. Yep.
Thank you.